Richard, there you are.
Hi, Shell. So I've just been, this is action learning, for real now, because
It is.
we've got a
Well,
new toy with this particular app, and we're just working it out as we go. And think we seem to have cracked it.
yeah, high stakes experiment. How was your day?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, pretty good. And there's a bit of sunshine, sort of late in the day, and coming to this side of the house, you managed to catch a bit of it if you've been in the office at the front during the day. So, yeah, the sun is just starting to go down here in Cardiff. And how is it where you are?
Yeah, good. Quite sunny here, as you can see. I've been in my indoor office all day because it's actually been really
Yeah,
warm. Yeah, so
yeah,
yeah, clearly we've given you a new toy and you couldn't bear to
yeah. I
wait.
couldn't resist. Yeah, well, I think exactly. I had to play with the new toy, which I can see lots of potential for in terms of live streaming, and I just think I've got to embrace the fact that a lot of the communication methods are less formal than we've been used to in the past.
Yeah,
And I mean, I've got kind of quite hooked on some of the podcasts now, the political and the sort of social ones.
yeah.
And I learn a lot from actually just enjoying listening to them. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm the same. I'm an audio. I learned sort of half midway through my kind of learning journey that I was doing a lot of trying to read and write things, and actually I'm an audio visual learner. So, and I
yeah,
think a lot more people are than think they are.
yeah,
So it's great to just, I think, I how I feel about sort of new technologies. I just see it as a sort of chance to play, almost like a
yeah,
second childhood. So it's good to experiment with these things. And yeah, people just prefer a bit of actual live action, don't they,
yeah,
and
yeah.
reality.
Yeah, I
So
think so. And that was just like, talking about learning and technologies. We were at the show or fest, if you like. I don't know what to call it, a festival or exhibition,
yeah,
conference, kind of all of those things really, at London Excel last
yeah,
week. And it
yeah,
was a real buzz, wasn't it? There was a huge amount of excitement. And we had a few, as often is the way, good conversations in the margins, really, beyond the formal sessions. Um, and thought we might just sort of talk a little bit about what are our takeouts from that.
yeah,
And I have to confess, first of all, that I didn't go to any of the formal sessions. And I did go to the exhibition, and we walked around and spoke to a number of the providers and suppliers and a number of people informally. And often, I find you get a lot of the learning through that sort of networking, really. And
yeah.
we met a number of really interesting people, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. I noticed quite early on you were playing truant. So there were a number of really
Yeah, yeah,
there are a number of really good set focus sessions, so talks from industry leaders. Um, but I have to say, they mostly followed the same kind of pattern, which was that, ultimately the technology's here, the bots are here, it's all really exciting. But rather than just reaching for the latest vendor or technology, look and actually try and define the problem you're solving first.
yeah,
You were having real fun, which was sort of interacting with the stands and yeah, I got a lot of work done actually in the margins like you did,
yeah,
having sort of informal round the table conversations. I felt like that was the most
yeah.
rich part, just being together. I think there were 11,000 people there over the 2 days.
Amazing. I wondered if it was thousands rather than hundreds. So
Yeah. And
11,000, that's incredible.
for the first time in my career, certainly, I think there was a HR event happening next door to the learning tech
Yeah,
event, and we had much more footfall in the learning technologies event because that's
yeah,
where it's at.
yeah.
And
Interesting.
yeah, 200 vendors there were
Wow.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I noticed, as we went in to the hall, there was just so much of a buzz and excitement and lots of vendors. Um, and I guess I spoke to about four or five in quick succession.
Yeah, yeah,
And I guess the thing that I noticed was what they were offering was quite similar. And I'm looking at it as a kind of, I suppose, a learning theorist as well as action learner. And there seemed to be a lot of stuff that was, very content heavy. So it
yeah,
was kind of aggregated libraries of knowledge. In action learning terms, it's the P program knowledge. And I started to, you saw me sort of probing a little bit with some of the
mm,
vendors around, do you do anything around skills development? Do you do anything around organizational or group learning? My
Yeah.
conclusion from the few that I spoke to was that, you know, the knowledge is being sucked up around a number of subjects. There's some assumptions about learning that people learn or want to learn individually, whereas I
Yeah.
think that a lot of the valuable learning beyond knowledge happens in groups,
Yeah.
hence the kind of action learning approach. And when I started to ask about, okay, what about learning at the level of insights or organizational learning? I guess the salespeople were kind of a little less kind of confident, but they were, clearly what's happening is they're making great use of the technology and AI and the speed of ability to access knowledge and to package it. I suppose my kind of concern is in a world that we're in where there's a lot that we don't know, and we don't know what we need to know. Even we can't script solutions so easily unless it's
Yeah.
technical, very specific technical knowledge.
Yeah.
So in those situations, what as you'd expect me to say, given I've spent a number of years working on it, I believe we need to give more attention to helping people work out what are the key questions for research and collaborative sort of investigation. But I found a lot of it really exciting. I mean, the stuff to do with the robots and the avatars and all of that was fascinating. And I did
Yeah.
I caught myself kind of getting quite, even though I was dealing with a piece of coding, if you like, in terms of an avatar, um, which, is made to sort of appear like a human. And so we're kind of sort of ascribing human, qualities to them and assuming they
Yeah.
might be sentient, and they're not.
Yeah.
But
I
I
mean,
found it
obviously,
actually causing an impact on me. I was actually feeling quite emotional at this avatar that just was being really sarcastic.
yeah, I noticed, and it's kind of, yeah, you catch yourself, I think, when you're engaging, particularly we're talking about agentic AI, like where, data is very rapidly aggregated into something that feels human, it's humanoid. And I think that's quite an exciting area of AI, where you're engaging with something that actually is initiating a human response. That's a very exciting area
Yes. Yeah.
from our field. I think the
Yeah.
other area that's quite exciting is just the I suppose the stuff that happens in the background of learning, where the sort of, I guess, the less sexy side of learning,
Yeah.
where you're aggregating huge amounts of data into insight that then feeds learning. I think we looked at quite a few technologies that were just really shortcutting the sometimes quite laborious process of
Yeah.
designing learning.
Sure.
That's quite an exciting area in terms
Yeah.
of that sort of the wiring of learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think where I naturally found myself exploring was the agentic stuff, where to what degree can this this AI agent engage with a human and draw out behavioral
Yeah.
insights, group insights. But
Yeah.
I think no matter where you go with that, like you say, you're never going to take away the capacity of a human to ask the right questions. So
Yeah.
the AI can aggregate answers on the basis of an algorithm of massive data, but it's about the human kind of aspect is
Yeah.
asking the right question and
Yeah. I
prompt.
mean, I suppose my question is, are we ever going to be able to teach AI to have EQ?
Yeah,
And probably not, I think I would say at the moment. But I'm really interested in some of the technologies. We met a really interesting entrepreneur guy, Toby Sinclair,
yeah,
with his business Real Talk Studio, and we're going to trial some of his products, which are
yeah,
about using avatars, which I can see a way of possibly using them in the role of kind of role plays or what we would call real plays in a
yeah,
lot of the sort of the dynamic interpersonal work that we do.
yeah.
So I found that really quite interesting. The other thing,
Just
we had
on
a
that,
bit of a
sorry, Richard, just on
so
that one, I think
yeah,
one-to-one, that's working really well. And I
right,
think the next stage is how it's one to many or many to
right,
many. So getting it into
yeah,
group setting where the insights are shared across a group or collaboration, I think that isn't mature yet for AI. I think that's the next phase, I would say. Imagine a world where groups of avatars are interacting with humanoids with humans. Then you're going to get richer levels of relational insight. I don't think we're there yet.
It's exciting times, without a doubt. And one of the questions that we started to ask about was really what's the future of the learning and development profession, which I find quite interesting. I mean, I've been around a while, and when I started my career in the 80s,
I was born in 83, just to
so I probably had just started my IPM, which is the CIPD program, just before you were born. And the conversation then was, the big theme was, it was called personnel management then, but how does personnel management, which learning or employee development, we called it, was part of personnel management. How does personnel management get a place at the table, at the top table in business? Now, what's the sort of big theme that you picked up from the HR sessions that you went to?
So I'll be honest and say I don't think that rhetoric's moved on. So I know you played truant, you were on the floor, and I was upstairs in some of the talks. I think the most inspiring was from that I heard, at least, was a group of colleagues across different kind of sectors who were talking about the reality of transforming HR, and going from a space that's actually kind of centrist and uses language that people can't relate to and colleagues can't relate to moving that forward into being more task focused and actually using language that colleagues, clients understand. That was really, really inspiring. Some of the more problematic narratives were coming from actually the space of HR. Has HR got a place at the table? What does this mean about the future of HR? I boil it down to I saw sort of three types of thinking at that whole event. There were the people like us who were like, I wouldn't class myself as a digital native for sure, but I'm very happy to experiment with the technology. There are people like us. There are people who are just right at the start of their journey with the technology and still kind of maybe asking themselves, what's the role of humans in all of this, and maybe having some nervousness about that. And the ones that worried me the most were the people who you could see they were kind of sort of fighting the technology psychologically. So sort of like almost sort of proclaiming that the technology maybe has a space and a time, but actually it's going to disappear in time and we'll return to a kind of golden age of HR where it's all about spaces at the table. I worry for those people because I think the technology's here. Actually, we're embedding AI in the product, all the products we work with, aren't we? But actually we are just about keeping pace, it changes weekly. Like there are new vendors coming into the market daily in this space. So if you are a naysayer with AI, I think that is the biggest worry actually for organizations, that they're not accepting the critical role that the AI is now playing in HR. That it's now more and more about the quality and the synchronization between the HR team and the AI, so that the kind of human AI team as such.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, it's happening anyway, isn't it? So even if you're a naysayer, you can't get away. It's happening anyway. You're on the receiving end of it. You either embrace it or not. But I think it kind of, you raised some good questions, I thought, around what is the role for the learning and development specialists, which we might sort of class ourselves at, as a professional field. And I hesitate to say profession per se, because it's not a regulated profession, but it is a professional field, and we want to sort of do things ethically and do them well. And how do you think it's kind of changing, or going to have to change, people who are kind of working in this field? What's the future for us? I mean, in fact, will it exist as a professional field, in 5 years' time?
So I've quite a strong view on this. I think learning and development as a term is pretty much dead in the
Right.
water. I talk about learning architecture. So I view my role more akin to an architect than an artist, right? So I view my role as a kind of learning specialist as working with the AI or with the agent or with the learning management system and building quality into that. I also think, I know we talked at the event about this, that actually the role of the learning specialist now is about taking a task, taking a problem, a task, a solution, and breaking it down to its constituent parts, then aggregating, like sort of bringing systems and approaches, methodologies together to actually solve that task or to
Sure.
build skills for that task. So
Yeah.
it becomes more of a sort of constructivist kind of
Yeah.
approach to technology.
Yeah.
And I think it's about building the technology and the human system. So
Sure.
I think we may as well down tools now if there was no role for human systems. I think it's a socio-technical system now where,
Yeah.
as a learning architect, you will stand kind of at a bit of a distance from the technology platform and also drawing in more humanistic approaches as and
Yes.
when required, coaching,
Yeah.
mentoring, learning relationships, action
Yeah.
learning. I think there's a role for both and in
Yeah,
today's.
great. Yeah, absolutely. Socio-technical, and the principles of action learning, of which you were alluding to there, really, which is starting with the problem,
Yeah,
or starting with the business challenge,
yeah.
and I've kind of supported the idea of business-driven action learning for a number of years. That you start with an organizational question or challenge. It may be an existential question. It might be stuff that was, a few years ago, it was kind of based on what was happening with the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen it through various sort of years with, economic crisis, where there are kind of big questions that need to be tackled. And I guess now there are kind of ethical questions as well that, people are asking, and starting with those,
On that, there was a big debate around ethics actually in some of the sort of keynotes, and again, quite a big topic, quite a divisive topic. There were some who I think were wrestling with just ethics as the kind of driver around AI, and others saying actually it's about like I was saying before, it's about defining with clarity where AI has a kind of a role and where it doesn't,
yeah,
and actually
yes,
where the human, defining what's human and what
yes,
isn't, and where the technology meets the human in the best way. So
yeah,
I think, so looking at sort of some of the programs and activities we support,
yeah,
I think that over time we've had maybe an initial tendency to reach for the technology to bring
yeah,
the user experience to life, when actually the user experience is really powerful. Where we're looking to use technology now is to enhance the back end and to actually make the data and insights more rapid and quicker
yeah,
and more in the moment. And I think that is user experience. I should say as well, one of the other elements that I think might surprise some people is, organizationally, we're moving away from having what they would call a destination platform for learning. So
yes,
having one kind of a library of content where, it's the oracle of learning,
yeah,
towards having a kind of mixture of different technologies for different things.
yeah,
So the kind of the agentic stuff is about, if you want something that deals with difficult conversations, you have an avatar that deals with difficult conversations. If you need like massive, large scale insights, then you use a different platform for that. And I think,
sure,
yeah, there's a bit of a mantra, maybe a bit of a naivety that actually having a destination platform is the silver bullet, and it
yeah,
really is in this space anymore.
sure,
And you saw
yeah,
that interacting with some of the content heavy suppliers. It has its limit.
yeah. Yeah, that's right. I think, there are a few assumptions that they're working with, which I would actually question, that people, mainly want to learn as individuals, and they want mainly knowledge and content, and that if you give the knowledge and the content, then that equals learning. And for me, it doesn't, in the world of professional work in organizations, it doesn't necessarily mean learning
No.
beyond retention of knowledge, and even then you might not retain it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean learning in terms of putting the knowledge into some form of practice,
Absolutely.
and socializing it, and with the real sort of, as you say, human context and organizational context. So I think there's a kind of few big assumptions that are made, and I can see it's big business as well, obviously, for the providers. So
Oh
they're all
yeah.
caught up, I think, in sort of competing with each other, and a number of them I heard are acquiring each other. So they're sort of, the vendors are purchasing vendors, for instance. So there's kind
Yeah.
of a frenzy going on at the moment. But I think, for us in the sort of professional world of learning and development, there's some work to be done, I think, around actually helping our professional field transform itself.
I couldn't agree more. So, like, transformation as a service in this field is
Yeah,
massive. There's not
yeah,
enough actually original research in this
yeah,
area
yeah,
around sort of learning transformation and transforming dated models into something much more
yeah,
tech enabled. So, I try and boil it down to simple language. I say there are three kind of elements of this. There's no one platform that suits them all, but if you put platform with a project and a professional skill, that for me is a sweet spot for anything.
yeah,
Ultimately, like you say, the platform alone is just going to give you largely boring content.
yeah, yeah,
It's not until you actually exercise a professional skill on a live challenge
yeah, yeah,
you're learning at all. So that if you can kind
yeah.
of put it down to platform, project, and profession or skill,
Sure, sure.
it's as simple as that. But the
Yeah.
research needs to be done in that area for sure.
Yeah, and one of the areas, just to mention a bit of a plug for our Action Learning Facilitator accreditation,
Mm,
postgraduate program that is launched and accredited by York St John University London campus. And behind that is the construct of action learning facilitation that I developed based on research that had preceded my work. And actually, it originated with the likes of Reg Revans, who developed action learning as an approach. And based on that, I said that there are three aspects of facilitating action learning, which I think are relevant to what you've just been saying. So, how do you mobilize learning? So, in other words, how do you get it to happen through discussion with the key people, sponsors, get it to happen organizationally? Yes, how do you do the stuff that good facilitators do in a learning group or set? That's the more visible and obvious aspect of it. And then how do you become a really good learning catalyst? How do you
mhm.
actually help learning happen at the margins, across silos, between organizations, across different professional fields, across different sectors, etc. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of where I think I'd like to think I'm bringing some of my kind of previous thinking into the current challenges that we've got to help people prepare for the future.
100%. And I'd just say with that, yes, facilitation, because that ultimately creates, independence in organizations at a time when they need it most, right? And it's getting more and more chaotic out there. But we also need to enable people to find their own way through strategically, and
Yeah,
for leaders to find a way through. So I think, there are methods in our sort of suite of action learning that face into the whole gamut of transformation challenges,
yeah,
right? Whether it be a strategic challenge where you need to break through or you're stuck, whether it be a leadership challenge where you need to regenerate your leadership or navigate today's environment. But critically important is that actually, we're building organizations that can do that for themselves
yeah,
as well, which
yeah,
is where the facilitator piece comes in. It's not
yeah.
just about facilitating learning, it's facilitating organizational success and growth,
Yes, yeah,
transformation. And that I think is quite rare in the market. I didn't see a lot actually. I mean, it was a great event, and I'm so glad we made the time to go. But the element I saw least of was how to train others in the
yes,
capabilities for the future. There was
yes,
a lot of dependency building in the
mm,
current
yeah,
algorithm I'm excited to see how we train the force or retrain the force to actually embed technologies in, a much more kind of meaningful way that empowers organizations to master the technology. I think that's the space of the future, isn't it?
Yeah. Great. Well, it was a bit of an experiment having this as a live stream call. We've used the new product that we've now subscribed to. We'll see the results of it shortly when we have a look. And if anybody's listening or watches it in the future, feel free to join in the discussions that we're generating on LinkedIn, or ask us any questions you've got about the the Action Learning Facilitator program, or whatever. Just, really good sort of good discussion. The sun's gone down now behind
Yeah,
me.
it's a bit colder here.
I'm gonna have my green drink now.
What is that?
Oh,
That
it's
looks like,
very healthy, Shell. So mine's a healthy drink. Cheers. What's yours?
yeah, cheers. I've got a Stella, but I've been kind of sipping it as I went along. I wasn't really sure what the routine was, but it is Vera Clark. That looks like some sort of
Okay,
very dangerous
I'll drink
spirit.
this. Okay.
Enjoy it. And yeah, well, text example of
Cheers. Yeah.
action learning, just like having a go.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'd say, like, if people are interested, maybe give us some recommendations for what you'd like to hear about next time. Like,
Yeah.
what would they like us to debate? Would you like to be part of that conversation?
Yeah.
And we'll look forward to coming back on the airwaves.
Okay.
All right,
See you
thanks.
all. Bye.
Have a good
Bye.
evening. Okay, bye.
Bye.